There's a gate on Marvin Studer's farm that hasn't opened for an outside animal in 22 years. The gate is steel tube, standard 12-foot farm gate, hung on wooden posts at the entrance to the main pasture. The gate opens every day. Marvin drives through it to check cattle, to feed, to move cows between pastures, to bring the vet in for pregnancy checks in October. The gate is not locked. The gate is not welded shut. The gate opens for people and equipment and the veterinarian's truck. The gate does not open for cattle that were born on another farm. Not a cow, not a bull, not a heifer, not a steer. Nothing with 4 hooves and a hide that didn't enter the world on Marvin Studer's 520 acres in Lynn County, Missouri. The gate has been closed to outside cattle since 1996. That was the year Marvin made the decision that the sale barn called insane, and that the co-op called stubborn, and that the veterinarian called the smartest thing a cattleman in Lynn County had ever done. Marvin closed his herd. He stopped buying replacement females from the sale barn. He stopped buying bulls from other breeders. He started raising every replacement heifer from his own cow herd and leasing bulls through an artificial insemination program that eliminated the need to bring a live bull onto the property from an outside source. Every animal in the herd was born on the farm, raised on the farm, bred on the farm, and would die or be sold from the farm without ever contacting an animal from another operation. The practice has a name in veterinary epidemiology: a closed herd. The closed herd is the gold standard of biosecurity in livestock production. The recognition that every animal brought onto a farm from an outside source carries the risk of introducing a disease that didn't exist in the herd before the animal arrived. The risk isn't theoretical. The risk is trichomoniasis, bovine viral diarrhea, Johne's disease, anaplasmosis, pink eye strains the resident herd has no immunity to, respiratory viruses from stressed sale barn cattle, foot rot organisms from contaminated lots, and the 40 other infectious agents that travel from farm to farm in the bloodstream, the reproductive tract, and the manure of cattle that are purchased from strangers and placed beside cattle that have never met a stranger. The sale barn is the opposite of a closed herd. The sale barn is an open herd, the most open herd imaginable. Cattle from 50 to 100 farms pass through a single facility in a single day, breathing the same air, standing in the same pens, drinking from the same water troughs, depositing feces on the same concrete where the next group of cattle will stand in 2 hours. The sale barn is an epidemiologist's nightmare, a mixing vessel where the disease status of 3,000 head from 100 farms is combined and redistributed to the 80 farms that buy from the sale that day. A farmer who buys 10 replacement heifers from the sale barn is buying 10 animals that have been exposed to the disease profile of every farm that sold cattle through that facility on that day. The farmer doesn't know which farms those were. The farmer doesn't know the health history of those herds. The farmer doesn't know what's traveling in the blood and the mucus and the reproductive tract of the 10 heifers he loads on his trailer and takes home and turns out with his cow herd. In Lynn County, the cattle country south of Brookfield, where the herds are Angus and the grass is fescue, and the sale barn in Brookfield runs every Wednesday from March through November. The sale barn was the primary source of replacement females for 90% of the cow-calf operations. A farmer who needed 15 replacement heifers to maintain his herd size, replacing the old cows that were culled each year, drove to the sale barn, bought 15 heifers, hauled them home, and turned them out with the herd. The transaction took 4 hours. The cost was $900 to $1,200 per head. The heifers were breeding age, ready to go. No waiting. Marvin's system was slower. Marvin kept 12 to 15 heifer calves from his own calf crop every year, the best daughters of his best cows, selected by weaning weight, disposition, and the udder and structural conformation of their dams. The heifers were developed on the farm, grown slowly on grass, and a small amount of grain from weaning in October through breeding the following May. Approximately 18 months of management that the sale barn purchase eliminated. The development cost was approximately $600 per heifer in feed, mineral, and veterinary expenses over 18 months. The sale barn heifer cost $900 to $1,200 at the ring. No development required. The co-op's math was straightforward. Marvin Studer raises his own replacements. He keeps 15 heifers per year that he could sell for $900 each at weaning. That's $13,500 in foregone calf revenue. Then he develops them for 18 months at $600 per head, another $9,000 in feed and management. His total cost to produce 15 replacement heifers, $22,500. He could buy 15 at the sale barn for $18,000 and save $4,500. Marvin's replacements cost more than the sale barns. The $4,500 gap was the number the co-op used against Marvin for 22 years. $4,500 per year in excess replacement cost, because Marvin insisted on raising his own instead of buying someone else's. The someone else's was the part Marvin cared about, but the co-op didn't hear it, because the co-op heard dollars, and Marvin was speaking biology. "I know what's in my cattle," Marvin told the sale barn manager, a man named Pete Griswold, when Pete asked why Marvin hadn't been buying at the Wednesday sale. "I know their health history because I own their health history. I know their vaccination record because I gave the vaccinations. I know their breeding history because I bred them. I know their disease status because I've tested the herd for trick and BVD every year since 1996. And the tests have been negative every year since 1996. I know what's in my cattle because nothing gets in my cattle that I didn't put there. You're paying $4,500 a year for peace of mind. I'm paying $4,500 a year for a disease-free herd. The peace of mind is free." Pete didn't argue. Pete sold cattle. Marvin didn't buy cattle. The conversation was the same every year. Pete suggesting that the sale barn had quality heifers at competitive prices. Marvin declining because the price wasn't the variable Marvin was managing. The variable Marvin was managing was risk. The risk of buying an animal that carried something invisible, something that a visual inspection couldn't detect, and a sale barn health guarantee didn't cover. Something that would enter Marvin's herd through a new heifer's reproductive tract or respiratory system and spread through the cow herd before the symptoms appeared. Now let me tell you about what Marvin was afraid of, because the disease that proved him right has a name that most cattlemen in Missouri can't pronounce, but that every cattleman in Missouri can calculate the cost of: trichomoniasis, trichomoniasis, Trich is a venereal disease of cattle, a single-celled protozoan parasite that lives in the reproductive tract of infected bulls and is transmitted to cows during breeding. The bull shows no symptoms. The bull looks healthy, breeds normally, and passes the Trich test only if the veterinarian collects a preputial scraping and cultures it in a laboratory, a test that costs $30 per bull and that most cattlemen don't perform because most cattlemen don't know. Their bulls need testing for a disease they've never heard of. The cow that is infected by the bull becomes pregnant normally. The embryo develops for 40 to 70 days, and then the Trich organism invades the uterine lining and kills the embryo. The cow aborts. The abortion is early enough that the farmer doesn't see it. No dead calf on the ground, no bloody discharge, no visible sign. The cow simply comes up open at pregnancy check. She was bred. She conceived. She lost the calf at 60 days, and the farmer doesn't know why. One infected bull can breed 30 cows. If 60 to 70% of those cows lose their calves to Trich-induced abortion, the farmer has 18 to 21 open cows at fall pregnancy check instead of 30 bred cows. 18 to 21 cows that won't calve in the spring. 18 to 21 calves that won't exist. At $900 per calf, the loss is $16,200 to $18,900 from one bull in one breeding season, from a disease the farmer couldn't see and didn't test for. The bull gets infected at the sale barn, or from a heifer that came from a herd that had Trich, or from a neighbor's bull that jumped the fence. The transmission pathway always involves an outside animal, an animal that wasn't born on the farm, wasn't tested on the farm, wasn't managed on the farm. The disease enters through the gate. The closed gate prevents the disease from entering. The closed herd has no pathway for Trich because the closed herd has no pathway for outside animals. Now let me tell you about the fall of 2018, because the pregnancy check results in Lynn County that October told a story that made the sale barn go quiet. The veterinarian who served most of the cattle operations in Lynn County was Dr. Alan Messerly, a large animal practitioner out of Brookfield who had been preg-checking cows in the county since 1992. In October of 2018, Dr. Messerly performed pregnancy examinations on approximately 4,200 cows across 38 operations in the county. The results were normal on 31 operations, pregnancy rates of 88 to 95%, typical for well-managed herds with adequate nutrition and sound breeding programs. On 7 operations, the results were catastrophic. The 7 herds had pregnancy rates of 52 to 68%, not 88 to 95, 52 to 68. On a 100-cow operation expecting 92 bred cows, the farmer was looking at 55 to 68. The missing 24 to 40 cows, the cows that should have been bred but weren't, represented 24 to 40 calves that wouldn't exist the following spring. At $950 per calf, the loss per operation ranged from $22,800 to $38,000. Across 7 operations, with a combined 640 cows, the total missing pregnancies were approximately 220 cows. The total lost calf revenue, approximately $209,000. $209,000 gone. Not from a blizzard, not from a drought, Not from a market crash. From a parasite the size of a human blood cell that traveled from one farm to another in the reproductive tract of a bull or a heifer that someone had bought at the sale barn. Dr. Messerly suspected trick immediately. The pattern: multiple herds in the same area, catastrophic open rates concentrated in young cows and first calf heifers, was the classic trick fingerprint. He collected preputial scrapings from the bulls on all 7 operations. The lab results came back in 10 days. 5 of the 7 herds tested positive for trichomonas fetus. 5 herds, 5 bulls, 5 pathways that all traced back to the same source, outside cattle. In 3 of the 5 cases, the infected bull had been purchased at the Brookfield sale barn within the previous 2 years. In one case, the infection entered through a replacement heifer purchased from a dispersal sale in Macon County. In the 5th case, the pathway was unclear. Possibly a fence-jumping bull from the neighboring operation, which was also positive. The 5 positive herds had to be cleaned. Cleaning. A trick-positive herd is expensive, slow, and emotionally devastating. Every bull on the operation must be tested. Every positive bull must be culled, sent to slaughter, not sold as a breeding animal, because selling a trick-positive bull is selling a biological weapon to the buyer. Every open cow must be tested and either culled or isolated. The herd must be retested 90 days after the positive bulls are removed. If any cow tests positive at retest, she is culled. The cleaning takes 1 to 2 breeding seasons, 12 to 24 months, during which the farmer's pregnancy rates remain below normal and the calf crop remains reduced. The financial impact of cleaning a trish-positive herd: approximately $35,000 to $55,000 per operation over 2 years. The culled bulls, the culled cows, the lost calves, the veterinary testing, and the replacement animals that had to be purchased to rebuild the herd to its pre-outbreak size. Across 5 operations, approximately $200,000 to $275,000 in total cleanup costs, added to the $209,000 in lost calf revenue from the 2018 breeding season. A total outbreak cost of approximately $409,000 to $484,000 in Lynn County, $500,000. From a parasite that entered through gates that were open to outside cattle. Marvin Studer's pregnancy rate in October 2018, 94%. 61 bred out of 65 cows exposed, normal, healthy, no trick, no BVD. No mystery opens, no missing calves, no $35,000 cleanup, no culled bulls, no culled cows. The same pregnancy rate Marvin had been posting every October since 1996, 22 years of 90 to 95% bred rates, 22 years of negative trick tests, 22 years of a closed gate that kept outside diseases outside. $4,500 per year in excess replacement cost. Over 22 years, $99,000. The cost of the closed herd over 2 decades. The cost of the outbreak for 5 herds in a single year, $409,000 to $484,000. Marvin's $99,000 in biosecurity had prevented the $409,000 that his neighbors paid in a single season. The insurance was cheaper than the event. The insurance was always cheaper than the event. Marvin had been saying that for 22 years, and nobody had listened because nobody had seen the event. Now let me tell you about Pete Griswold, because the sale barn manager, who had been asking Marvin to buy heifers every Wednesday for 22 years, drove to Marvin's farm on a Saturday afternoon in November of 2018 and stood at the gate that hadn't opened for an outside animal since 1996. Pete was 58 years old. He'd managed the Brookfield sale barn since 2001. 17 years of moving cattle through the ring. 17 years of commissions on the cows and bulls and heifers that passed through his facility. The trich outbreak was Pete's crisis, not because Pete had caused it, but because Pete's facility was the mixing vessel where the infected animals and the clean animals had been combined. 3 of the 5 infected bulls had been purchased through Pete's sale. Pete's facility hadn't tested the bulls for trich before the sale because sale barn testing wasn't required by Missouri law and wasn't practiced by any sale barn in the state. The bulls had been sold as sound breeding animals, guaranteed for breeding by the seller, with no mention of trich because the seller either didn't know his bull was infected or didn't test. Marvin: Pete, 5 herds in the county are positive. 3 of the bulls came through my sale. I didn't test them. Nobody tests at the sale barn. The seller signed a breeding soundness guarantee, and the guarantee didn't include trich, because nobody asks about trich until it shows up. I know. Your herd is clean. My herd has been clean since 1996 because my herd has been closed since 1996. No outside cattle, no outside diseases. The gate is the test. The gate is negative for everything because nothing comes through the gate. Pete looked at the gate, the standard 12-foot tube gate, hung on wooden posts, the chain and latch worn smooth from daily use. The gate looked like every other gate on every other farm in the county. The difference wasn't the gate. The difference was the policy behind the gate. The decision, made 22 years ago, that no animal born on another farm would enter this property. The decision that cost $4,500 per year. The decision that saved $409,000 in a single season. The decision that looked expensive when cattle were healthy and looked cheap when cattle were infected. I sell cattle for a living, Pete said. I sell replacement heifers to every operation in this county. I tell farmers the sale barn is the efficient way to source genetics. Buy what you need when you need it, at market price. The efficiency is real. The risk is real too. The efficiency doesn't include the cost of the disease that the efficient system distributes. My sale barn moved 14,000 head through the facility last year. If 2% of those cattle carried trich, 280 animals, and those 280 animals were distributed across 80 farms, the sale barn didn't just sell cattle. The sale barn sold the disease. The sale barn is a highway. Everything travels on a highway. People, goods, and diseases. My farm is a dead end. Nothing travels to a dead end that doesn't start there. The dead end is slower. The dead end is less efficient. The dead end doesn't have the selection of the highway. But the dead end is clean because the dead end is isolated. And isolation is the only biosecurity that works every time. Pete went quiet. He stood at the gate for a while, the gate that had saved Marvin's herd from a $500,000 parasite, the gate that the co-op had called stubborn for 22 years, the gate that was, by every measure that mattered in November of 2018, the most valuable piece of equipment on the farm. Now let me tell you about what happened in the county after the outbreak, because the trick event changed the conversation at the sale barn in a way that 22 years of Marvin's quiet example hadn't. Dr. Messerly organized a county-wide meeting on trick management in January of 2019. 52 cattlemen attended, the largest veterinary meeting in the county's history. The data was sobering. 5 positive herds, 220 lost pregnancies, approximately $484,000 in total costs. The source in 3 cases, sale barn bulls. The solution, test every bull before breeding season. Require trick testing for all sale barn bulls. And consider, Dr. Messerly used the word carefully, consider closing herds to outside cattle. The consider closing recommendation drew the reaction that Marvin had predicted. Resistance. The cattlemen who had been buying replacement heifers from the sale barn for 30 years heard, close your herd, and heard, raise your own replacements, and heard $4,500 per year in excess cost, and heard, change everything you've been doing. The resistance was economic, cultural, and practical. Economic because raising replacements was more expensive than buying them. Cultural because the sale barn was the social center of the county's cattle industry, and practical because many operations didn't have the genetics, the facilities, or the management skill to produce quality replacement heifers from their own cow herd. Marvin spoke at the meeting. He wasn't comfortable speaking. 22 years of keeping his mouth shut at the co-op counter, while people criticized his replacement program, hadn't built the habit of public speaking. "But doctor," Messerly asked, and Marvin stood and said what he'd been saying privately for 2 decades. "I don't buy cattle. I raise cattle. Every heifer in my herd was born on this farm from a cow that was born on this farm from a cow that was born on this farm. The lineage is closed. The disease risk is closed with it. I spend $4,500 more per year than a man who buys from the sale barn. I haven't spent $484,000 on a tree outbreak because I can't get trich from cattle I don't have. The $4,500 is the premium. The $484,000 is the claim. You can pay the premium or you can pay the claim. The premium is cheaper. The premium is always cheaper." "But what about genetics?" someone asked from the back. "You breed your own cows to your own semen. Where do you get new genetics if you never bring in an outside animal?" "Artificial insemination. I lease semen from 5 different sire lines. Proven Angus bulls with EPD data and progeny records that tell me more about the genetics than I could learn from looking at a bull in a sale pen for 45 seconds. The semen arrives in a tank of liquid nitrogen. The tank doesn't carry trich. The tank doesn't carry BVD. The tank carries genetics without biology. That's the distinction. I import genetics. I don't import biology. The genetics improve the herd. The biology threatens the herd. AI lets me have one without the other." The meeting produced modest change. The Brookfield sale barn implemented a voluntary trich testing program for breeding bulls in 2019. Sellers could submit a negative trick test with their consignment, and the test result was announced from the ring. The testing was voluntary, not mandatory. Approximately 40% of the bulls sold through the barn in 2019 came with trick tests. The other 60% didn't. Because the testing cost $30 per bull and many sellers considered $30 an unnecessary expense for a disease that most bulls didn't carry and that most buyers didn't ask about. 7 farms in the county moved toward closed or semi-closed herds after the outbreak, keeping more replacement heifers from their own calf crop, reducing the number of outside purchases, and testing every animal that entered the herd from an outside source. 7 out of 180 cattle operations. Not a revolution, a beginning. The beginning that happens after the event, the way seatbelt laws happen after car crashes and fire codes happen after buildings burn. The recognition, always late, that prevention is cheaper than the damage it prevents. Let me tell you about how this ends. Marvin Studer is 68 years old. His son, Wade, manages the cattle operation. 85 head now, up from 65 when Marvin closed the herd in 1996. The increase came entirely from within. Heifer calves retained, developed, bred, and added to the cow herd. Over 26 years of internal growth. The herd has never purchased a female. The herd has never hosted a live bull from another operation. Every pregnancy in the herd since 1996, approximately 1,800 pregnancies over 26 years, has been the result of artificial insemination with semen from proven sires, selected by EPD data, and delivered in a liquid nitrogen tank that carries no disease. The herd's pregnancy rate over 26 years, 92% average. The county average, 86%. Dragged down by the trichomoniasis outbreak of 2018 and the lower grade reproductive losses that open herds experience from chronic exposure to BVD. Leptospirosis, and the background level of reproductive disease that travels through the sale barn system. The 6-point gap in pregnancy rate, 92 versus 86, represents approximately 5 extra calves per year on an 85-head operation at $1,100 per calf. $5,500 per year in additional calf revenue that the closed herd produces by maintaining a clean reproductive environment. $5,500 per year in additional revenue against $4,500 per year in excess replacement cost. The closed herd doesn't just prevent catastrophic losses, it produces $1,000 per year in net advantage from the higher pregnancy rate that a disease-free herd maintains. The $1,000 is invisible. It doesn't appear on a sale ticket or a vet bill. It appears in the pregnancy check numbers, in the calf count in March, in the weaning weights in October, in the cumulative productivity of a herd that has never been disrupted by a disease that entered through a gate. The gate is still closed 26 years. The gate has been the most effective veterinary intervention on the farm, more effective than any vaccine, any antibiotic, any dewormer, any mineral program. The gate prevents what the veterinarian treats. Prevention is cheaper than treatment. It has always been cheaper. The co-op just never wanted to calculate it. The Farmall 806 that Marvin uses for hay work sits in the machine shed. Wade uses it for the same jobs, feeding, fencing, the daily chores that a cattle operation requires. The tractor passes through the gate every day. The cattle don't. The cattle were born inside the gate, and they will stay inside the gate. And their calves will be born inside the gate. And the herd will remain what it has been since 1996. Closed, clean, and productive in a county where open herds paid $500,000 to learn what Marvin learned from a $30 trick test and a gate that stays shut. The cheapest veterinary tool on this farm is the gate latch, Marvin says. Every disease I've never had because I never let it through the gate. The sale barn sends cattle to 80 farms per week. The sale barn also sends diseases to 80 farms per week. I get my cattle from the pasture. The pasture doesn't send diseases because the pasture doesn't mix animals from 100 different operations in a single afternoon. The disease hit 5 herds. In 2018, Marvin's Gate kept it out. That's the whole story. Subscribe to The Average Farmer for more. We'll see you in the next one.